I have with me today Matei Psatta, co-founder of Blindspot and the person behind the #1 most upvoted Reddit post of all time.
That definitely this decade, digital out of home will surpass print in terms of spend and in terms of reach, in terms of advertising spend, and I'm talking globally at this point. The best way to know if your ad will truly stand out is to ask yourself, could ChatGPT do this? A lot of people try QR codes on digital out of home campaigns. The reason those don't work is because
Hey everybody, and welcome to a new episode for the Drag and Drop show by Creatopy. I'm Robert Katai, Marketing and Communication Manager here at Creatopy, and I have with me today Matei Psatta, co-founder of Blindspot and the person behind the #1 most upvoted Reddit post of all time. So thank you, Matei, for joining to this webinar, to this episode. It's not a webinar, it's an episode of our Drag and Drop podcast. So my question for you is this: what's your personal take on where the digital out of home industry is headed in the next few years, and how do you see online advertising fitting into that picture? Like, do you have any bold prediction or hot takes that might surprise our audience, for example?
Thanks for having me, first of all. But I guess I always have a hot take. So in terms of where digital out of home is going, it's a very interesting perspective because it really depends on who you ask from the industry. So the first thing that's obvious for a lot of people is that digital out of home is growing faster than ever. So basically more and more static or print formats are being transitioned to digital. And the rough estimates are that definitely this decade, digital out of home will surpass print in terms of spend and in terms of reach and I'm talking globally at this point. And in terms of reach and in terms of advertising spend and everything like that. Now, at the same time, when a new format, because digital out of home is essentially a new format, simply because you're now talking about loops, you're talking about share of voice. You're not only talking about individual prints, because back in the day, the way you would print, the way you would plan a media campaign for out of home would be basically looking at the number of faces that you have, right? So you have 10,000 faces, 10,000 units basically spread across the country, whatever country that is, doesn't matter. And you have some general reach data, and then you kind of forget about it for the next 6 months or however long you've planned the campaign. Now, with digital out of home, not only can you be more dynamic, but you have to be more dynamic because the channel simply doesn't let you get away with putting one creative up there and forgetting about it for 3 months. You get diminishing returns, essentially. So what happens is, even though you might have great impact on one creative for the first couple of weeks and maybe even the first month, that basically starts sliding off after the first month, if not even sooner. Simply because people forget about it, people develop what you call banner blindness. If you see the same thing over and over again, your mind just ends up kind of having a blank screen there instead of actually understanding the message of the ad and seeing the call to action and actually considering the message. So, and that's where programmatic comes in really nice, because obviously the majority of digital out of home buys right now are direct, and they are basically in the same format as traditional out of home. So you talk to a media agency, you talk to the landlord, or you talk to the network operator, and you essentially set up a long-term deal in order to get to secure your advertising slot there. With programmatic out of home, though, you can be way more flexible, and you're basically able to run ads at specific hours, start creating contextual ads and say, I want this to run if it's raining outside, I want this to run if the Dodgers win their match, I want this to run if my product is doing well, and I want this to run if my product isn't doing well. So you're able even to link e-commerce data up to a point. We're doing now, for example, in our case, we have this really cool case study coming up where the client is essentially running real-time brand lift surveys on different creatives, and what they're going to do is they're going to stick with the creative that has the best impact. And not only that, but then they're going to translate that to print OOH, because they have a couple of deals already in place, but they don't know what the ideal message to run on that print for the next 3 months is. So digital out of home is also a great way to test what you want to do in print advertising, so out of home advertising, simply because that is usually a larger investment. The rollout time is longer and more expensive, because you actually have to produce the creative, rather than with digital out of home, where you can simply repurpose content from online advertising. And in terms of how online advertising, since we got to that kind of chips in, we're seeing more and more mixes happening. For example, we have a campaign running with some partners of ours, where the client is basically geo-targeting Spotify ads in proximity to the billboards that they're running with us. So essentially, you see the billboard, and if you have Spotify ads enabled on your phone, so you're not paying a premium plan, you essentially also get the same ad, or the same campaign, not the same ad, because it's an audio ad instead of a visual one, on your phone. And we've noticed that not only does that lead to more conversions, simply because you're exposed to this, the same message on two different channels, it also impacts how PPC campaigns are working. So we see higher click-throughs on those campaigns. We see higher conversion rates, because you're basically getting exposed to the same message on different channels. It's building trust, and it's just building frequency as well, right? Because you're not seeing it only on your mobile phone, or only on your connected TV, or whatever the client is targeting. So that was a long question, so you also got a long answer out of it. But let me know if you want me to deep dive on anything.
No, I understand. And when I was thinking about this discussion with you, I had this topic that I'm very interested about. So, as someone who's worked extensively in the last couple of years in the digital out-of-home advertising, and also, let's say, design, what do you think separates the good ads from the great ones? Like, can you share any personal anecdotes of example of ads that really stood out to you, and what made them memorable, especially now that you worked on campaign for brands and celebrities like Snoop Dogg, Kanye West, Morning Brew, Pixar, Duolingo, Chance the Rapper, and others?
Well, the first thing, and I was actually talking to a friend of mine from the industry a couple of days ago, the best way to know if your ad will truly stand out is to ask yourself, could ChatGPT do this? I actually saw an ad a couple of days ago, and I was curious if I can, with very minimum inputs or prompts, if I can recreate the ad in ChatGPT. And it took 3 prompts basically to create the same ad in ChatGPT. So just gave them some generic info. This is the target audience. This is the brand. I want something that has this rough concept. Generated a script for a TV ad, adjusted it a bit, and basically I had the same script within minutes. So the reason for that is not because ChatGPT is brilliant, or obviously it's a brilliant solution, but it's not because it's brilliantly creatively speaking. It's because what it does essentially is gives you the most likely statistical outcome, right? So basically it gives you what you would call a predictable or a banal ad. And in order to not have something predictable and banal, you need to stand out. So you need to be able to know what's happening right now. You need to throw in some lateral thinking in there, and you know why I say this, because I'm a big fan of lateral thinking. And it depends on if you're trying to stand out from the crowd, and you're not just trying to win over your competition by outspending them. You need to have a message that's different from the majority of them. And in order to be different, you have to quote Apple, think different. And that's all about the creative process. It's all about the creative workshops. It's all about the brainstorming process. It's all about the creative partners and agency that you bring in. It's about investing money in that creativity and not just saying, oh, we're going to spend a couple of days to think about the idea and that's it. You need to do your research for it. You need to A/B test stuff. So it's a whole ecosystem onto itself. Unfortunately, especially in the media planning world, creative is a second thought. You're like, okay, I have 100K, a million, 10 million to spend. Let's set up the media campaign, which can be a mix. It'll be digital out of home, it'll be TV, it'll be online, it'll be mobile, it'll be audio, whatever. It doesn't even matter. And then you're like, okay, now we know we want to promote product X, and we know we want to say it's the cheapest product on the market, and let's figure out how we say that in a fun way. But that's not usually how the process, that's not how I recommend you approach the process. It's the best impact I've seen is when you approach it the other way around. So obviously you know the product that you want to promote, you have some differentiators there, and then you think, okay, how do we make this stand out in terms of messaging? What type of message, regardless of channel, because then you can adapt the message to each channel. You can make a brilliant TikTok out of it, you can make a brilliant outdoor ad out of it, you can make a brilliant even radio spot out of it, right? One example that comes to mind, and they know their voice really well, and that's the perfect example of a creative first campaign, is Ryanair, right? So Ryanair knows what their core difference is. They're cheap, and that's it. They're not trying to overcomplicate it. They're not trying to say, oh, we offer, it is cheap, but we also invest and offer the best services out there. No, it's cheap and that's it. And they're actually, and you probably know their TikToks and you probably know their communication overall, they're leaning into it. Instead of fighting away from it, what a traditional marketer would do, and that's kind of the core instinct of a marketer. Oh, people say we have shitty service. So let's try to show them that we have great service. And that's what ChatGPT would do, right? That's the correct way. It's not a mistake, but it's just a predictable way of treating the problem. Whereas, if you go into lateral thinking, you would say, what if we accept that? What if we say, yeah, we have shitty service, and we have that service because we're able to offer you the lowest prices out there. So we're not trying to haggle you. We're not trying to hustle you. And once you lean into that, you really stand out in terms of communication. And again, for anybody watching, just check out Ryanair's TikTok, because that's the fastest way to get the idea of their tone of voice and their messaging. And they make fun of people who complain about the services. Obviously, nothing extreme, but it's like people saying that, oh, the window, there's this famous viral meme going around, this guy who booked the window seat, and his seat was an exit seat. So they had basically the little window next to the exit seat, and the guy posted, hey Ryanair, where's my window seat? And Ryanair took the photo. They just drew a circle around the very small submarine like window next to the exit seat, and just reposted it, and you're like, there it is. That's it. Again, it is controversial, and sorry, this is my final point. It is controversial, but in marketing, a lot of the time, being controversial is way better than being ignored.
I believe that it's a hard work to understand the differentiators between benefits and features. And when you understand that that's our benefits, and that's the benefits that our customers can get from our brand, from our product, from our services, not the features that we have and we just want to push them in front of them. I believe there is the different part of how can you leverage your marketing, because as you already said, the controversial in marketing and in design and also in advertising, it's better than just be ignored and just pump it up in that perspective that nobody will reach out to you. So measuring the success of a digital out-of-home ad campaign can be a tricky business. And maybe that was for me the first thing that when I heard that you starting this kind of project with TPS Engage, now it's Blindspot. And as someone who's been in the industry for a while, what metrics do you consider most important, and how do you go about tracking them? Like, have you ever had an ad campaign that didn't quite hit the mark, and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, we've had hundreds of campaigns that didn't work, but that's part of the process. Look, ultimately, again, probably hot take, and probably some people will disagree with this. No matter how nice you want to frame it as a marketer, ultimately the the thing that matters for any client is revenue generation, one way or another. If we're talking Coca-Cola, or if we're talking a small startup who's just trying out a new marketing channel, what they care at the end of the day is the bottom line. So, in order to get that, and yes, you can look, some campaigns are brand centric and they look at brand equity and brand awareness, but they look at that as a intermediary step towards revenue, right? So a lot of the times that's what we tell clients, like, look at revenue. And the way you look at revenue, even with your digital out of home campaigns, can be done in a few ways. The most popular ones that unfortunately we haven't seen really tracked properly are obviously QR codes. A lot of people try QR codes on digital out of home campaigns. The reason those don't work is because you don't get the full picture. People who see a digital billboard don't necessarily pull out their phone and scan the code. They might look up the brand, and we've seen clients who've seen triple digit increases on their brand name searches once they had a digital out of home campaign, right? Because you see, for example, your case, right? You see Creatopy, you pull out your phone, maybe you're not going to scan the QR code, maybe you're going to scan it if you have a super special offer that you can only get by scanning the QR code, but maybe you don't have time because the ads only run for 15 seconds, even less sometimes, and they loop, so you're not going to stay in front of a screen for 2 minutes to wait for your ad to run again, but you will remember the brand name, and you're just going to pull out your phone and you're going to type in, usually on Google, Creatopy, and go to the first hit, which can be an ad or can be an organic result, right? Or you're gonna type in the website because it's a memorable brand name and you know it, and you're just gonna go to creatopy.com without going through Google search. So we've seen an increase in search traffic and direct traffic, and the way you measure that, you simply look at the extra traffic. Did it convert? How many of them turned into paying customers? Obviously, you need to add something to that mix because maybe they don't turn into paying customers the moment they visit your website the first time. So you need to have a retargeting campaign to make sure that they eventually convert. But you can isolate it and say, okay, taking into consideration the spend that we had on billboards, the spend that we had on retargeting, maybe email marketing if we did that, this is our return on advertising spend, right? We spent 10K and we got 20K, there it is, right? We managed to get a really positive return on advertising spend. So that's one way. Now another is obviously word of mouth and awareness. And we've done a lot of viral campaigns, and this is a great way, in my opinion, to use digital billboards, and especially to use fractional buys, right? Because you don't need to have that billboard out there for a month. You can have it for a minimum amount of time in order to basically use the footage of it, so the photo or the video, and then amplify it on social media. We have clients who've actually switched up their online ads, and instead of having a generic banner, they now have a picture of the billboard as the online ad, if that makes sense. And they've noticed that has a better impact than just a generic visual because it helps build trust. The subconscious reaction is, oh, these guys are for real. They have a billboard in LA. They have a billboard in Times Square. They have a billboard wherever is relevant, for them. We've seen
it's
that.
Somehow, I'm sorry. It's somehow a social proof. It's the new kind of social proof you need because everybody can get these days like a press release. And I already had a discussion with someone on this episode, on this podcast, where they said that the press release ad, like you do a press release, you create an ad, you publish it, and you will see how it will work in your feed, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, because it's the social proof you need for your brand. And now with the digital out of home, you make the picture, you make an ad with it, you write a copy, you publish it. Here's another type of social proof you can use for your another kind of digital ad or another kind of ad. And I have one last question that is somehow interesting for my own personal perspective. Which one do you think it's working better or will work better in the digital out of home advertising? The static ad where it's just one photo, the animation where you can see all these motion graphs, or the video ads?
Honestly, it depends on the message. The ones I personally like the most and think are the most impactful are basically cinemagraphs. So it's a combination between static and video. So you don't necessarily have a video like a TV ad. So you have a message that can be clearly understood without having slides or having, motion. But there are some elements of the text that are animated in order to basically draw in the consumers and just make it stand out in a sea of static messages. So we've done a lot of stuff like that, and those have usually the best impact. It's because, one, it forces you to keep a short message and make it clearer, because we've had clients who have repurposed their TV ads on billboards. In my opinion, that's not the best way to do it, because you need to make sure that the person is looking at the entire ad in order to make sense of it, rather than if you have basically Oatly is a great example. So Oatly does almost text only billboards, right?
And they have their own font.
And they have their own font and everything. So obviously it's important to stand out. We can get into the branding discussion, but that's a different discussion altogether. But basically, you get their message within 2 or 3 seconds. You just need to read the copy once and you get it. Otherwise, if you have a full video, you need to watch the full 15 seconds or 10 seconds. Then you need to think back about it in your head and be like, okay, that's what it means. And then hopefully also remember the brand or the website or whatever you have to do in terms of call to action. So I think complicated visuals decrease the impact of digital out of home. Keep it simple and keep it relevant. The billboard that we did, that is the #1 most upvoted post in Reddit history, had 3 words on it. That was it. It had some animations in the background just to make it look cool, but the words were GME go brr, and that was it. And yes, it was obviously contextual marketing. If we did that now, nobody would care about it, but we did it at the right time, in the right moment, and in the right place, because people were trying to say that GameStop is a real thing and it's not just hype and it's not just people on the internet speculating, and Times Square gave it the authenticity and the trust that, hey, this is something real. People are actually talking about this. It's something that I'm seeing on my commute to work, because we would still commute to work back then. It was pre-COVID.
Yeah. Matei, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking with you. This was the pod for today. I hope it helped. And if people will want to find you, they can find you on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and check out blindspot.com.
Blindspot.com.
Okay. Check out blindspot.com.
Thanks
Matei.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Yep, bye.